The Second World War saw the creation of some of the most terrifying, innovative, and downright bizarre machines ever built. But even in a war full of flying bombs and rocket planes, one vehicle stands out as especially strange, and that would be the Kugelpanzer. Roughly translating as ball tank, this compact one-man vehicle looks like something out of a steampunk fever dream. Shaped like a metal hamster ball and powered by what may or may not have been a motorcycle engine, the Kugelpanzer wasn't just unconventional, it was just outright mysterious. It had no real weapons, its armor was barely bulletproof, and to this day no one actually knows who built it, why, or even where exactly it was found. Germany says one thing, Russia says another, the paperwork's missing, the blueprints are non-existent. Theories range from reconnaissance vehicle to mobile bunker to suicide bomb on wheels. And the further you dig, honestly the weirder it gets. Today the only known Kugelpanzer sits in a Russian museum, but its secrets, they're still sealed tight. So what was the Kugelpanzer? A forgotten prototype, a battlefield experiment? Or was it something a whole lot stranger? Let's find out. Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a professional, modern website without knowing how to code, or how to design, or how to find a friend who knows how to design or code. Look, I've used Squarespace myself many times, and if you're anything like me, you want to get something online quickly without sacrificing design or spending hours in a settings menu. For me, I will spend hours in the settings menu, and it'll still look terrible. With Squarespace, you get a great-looking website, exactly how you want it, and you don't have to know how to design. It's really great stuff. Plus, they've got this Blueprint AI feature. You answer a few basic questions and it generates a professional looking site in minutes, which is brilliant. They've also got email campaigns so you can run a newsletter, sell digital products, or whatever else you want to contact your fans or customers about. So if you're launching a project, a portfolio, a podcast, or just want a site that doesn't look like it came from 2014, head to squarespace.com/megaprojects for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the code MEGAPROJECTS to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. And now back to today's episode. Technical description and design features. The Kugelpanzer is a compact, spherical armored vehicle designed to carry a single operator. It measures approximately 1.7 meters in length and 1.5 meters in height. Despite its small size, however, it's heavier than you might imagine, weighing in at around 1.8 tons. Its armor plating is uniformly thin, measuring only 5mm thick on all sides. This thickness would be sufficient to deflect most standard rifle fire, but nothing really much bigger than that. In fact, at distances under 100 meters, there's every possibility that even these standard rifle rounds would penetrate. One thing's certain, though, whatever it was meant to do, direct combat almost certainly wasn't it. But never say never. Given how bizarrely little we know about this vehicle, nothing can be taken as a given. As for how it moves, rather uniquely, it moves using two large hemispherical steel wheels that encompass its central body. Interestingly, Russian language sources, which tend to be the most insightful and in-depth when it comes to the Kugelpanzer, often speculate that it may have had a circular rubber band or track mechanism of some kind stretched over these wheels. But that is pure speculation. There are no traces of such a thing left today. It also has a small tail wheel at the rear, partly to help with stability, but also with steering. Not that we know how it helped with steering, as its current custodians are remarkably tight-lipped about its internal details. But from the fact that we can see the carriage is clearly neither welded nor riveted to the boom in available photos, it stands to reason that this part was pivotal and thus may have helped with steering in one way or another. For its power, it has, or had, sources vary on whether it's still mounted, a 25 horsepower, 2-cylinder, air-cooled, 2-stroke petrol engine taken from a motorbike. The Kugelpanzer Tank Museum in Moscow, who currently have it as part of their Russian national collection, say as much, but they do not mention exactly which engine this was, so we're just left guessing. But that's something we can do. We could guess. Kind of nerds for this sort of thing here on Mega Project, so we dusted off our copy of German Motorcycles in World War II by Stefan Knittel and went looking for a potential engine match. You're welcome. This soon presented a problem, however, because both the BMW R75 and Zundap KS750, Germany's go-to motorbikes, used 4-stroke engines that produced 26 horsepower. Further still, there is not a single engine mentioned in Stefan's book that could be a match. So, yeah, we still don't have a clue, but guess we did. Is this a mistake on Kugelpanzer's part? Well, given the total lack of a matching engine in our book, we are inclined to believe so, although we should never rule out the possibility of there being some super niche low-production engine that escaped both our attention and Knittel's. This mystery surrounding its engine also makes us reluctant to comment on its top speed, but Kugelpanzer says that it tops out at 10 kph. with nothing else to work with, I guess we'll just go with that as a provisional figure. In terms of weaponry, Kugelpanzer says that it didn't have any due to there being no mountings left inside and no evidence that any ever existed. However, this fact is pretty hotly debated, with armor historian Mark Nash believing that it would have carried a machine gun of some kind, likely an MG-34 or MG-42, owing to the existence of what he believes is a weapons port that has since been welded over. We've got no idea which is correct ultimately, but to be fair to Mr. Nash, let's zoom in on this photo. And what do you see below the vision slit? Well, it's a little welded rectangle of pale metal. So, yeah, well, we don't want to say for certain. We know which way we'd lean on the matter if you put a gun to our heads. Internally, the Kugelpanzer would have a crew of just one, a fact made apparent purely by its small dimensions. Again, Kugelpanzer haven't released photos of the inside. Overall, the Kugelpanzer's design is extremely simplistic and wholly enclosed, a welded steel shell with two large drum-like wheels and a rear stabilizer. It lacks a turret, has no real suspension system, and offers limited visibility to its operator. The surviving unit's construction is surprisingly crude, with armor plates roughly riveted together between the wheels and visible hammering marks throughout. To some, this rough finish has raised eyebrows, as it doesn't match the precision typically imagined in German wartime engineering. To them, however, we've got a question for you. Have you ever seen the state of late-war German craftsmanship? Their tanks made in 44 to 45 can have some absolutely horrific craftsmanship, with metal cuts that look like they were done with someone's teeth rather than a cutting torch, and rivets that were seemingly popped in with an enthusiastic jump and a can-do attitude rather than, a rivet gun. So, what was it? Alright, we've poked at the Kugelpanzer's bizarre little shell, we've marveled at its hamster wheel-like propulsion system, noted its tragic excuse for armor, and tried unsuccessfully to pin down which obscure motorcycle it mugged for an engine. But all that leaves us with two screaming unanswered questions. Who actually built this thing, and why? And the answer to that is nobody knows. We aren't being hyperbolic there either. Legitimately, nobody knows the answer. There are no factory records, no production logs, no specification sheets, not even a pencil sketch in the back of an industrialist's notebook. It's just from nowhere. And given that it is generally believed to be a creation of Nazi Germany, hence its current paint job and our focus on German engines, this is nothing if not peculiar. Even with the late war let's burn everything so we can pretend we're not Nazis craze sweeping over the Reich in its final months, we tend to know a lot about their weird and failed tank projects. There are later documents, usually that weren't deemed incriminating enough to be worth burning, or were simply overlooked in the stress of it all. Gotta be quite stressful, doesn't it? To show you what we mean, consider the Neubaufahrzeug as an example. It was an interwar, do-it-all, heavy-ish tank intended to handle both fortifications and tank hunting duties, roles which the Wehrmacht nominally considered separate and immutable in its doctrine. They made 5 prototypes from 1934 to 1936, 2 out of soft steel and 3 out of actual armored plate. At that point, the project was abandoned because its transmission was just a bit shit. Its engine, pinched from an aircraft, was a bit blowy-uppy, and its armor was as thin as a wafer. They did send the prototypes to Norway at least, so that's something? So you probably see what we're getting at. We know everything about this tank. Endless photos, design documents, pretty much a full timeline of its development, cancellation, and very limited deployment. Truly the whole lot. So the fact that we have legitimately nothing for the Kugelpanzer is just more than a bit weird, isn't it? Not that that has stopped people from guessing, mind you. The most common theory pins the design on Krupp, the same industrial heavyweight that cranked out everything from super heavy railway guns to armored steel plating for warships. This fits well enough, sort of. Krupp had the budget, the facilities, and more than enough engineers willing to handle making a prototype tank. But, and we cannot stress this enough because it's something you'll often see stated as fact, we do not know for certain that it was their handiwork. Remember, there is literally no documentation at all. If Krupp did make it, they didn't leave so much as an invoice or a stamp on the outside of the tank that we can go off. Interestingly, some Russian sources push the idea that the Kugelpanzer predates Nazi Germany altogether, that it might be a 1920s or early 1930s prototype of some kind, perhaps inspired by World War I trench-busting ideas. And to be fair, there is a faint echo of that in its design. Those massive wheels, low profile, and snail's pace engine all scream static warfare, not blitzkrieg. It's like someone built it for the Somme, not Stalingrad. And it's not as if the Germans hadn't experimented with such concepts in the aforementioned conflict either. In February 1917, they created this thing, the Trefferswagen, and you have to admit, It is very Kugelpanzer-esque, isn't it? Its size, however, that is not very trench warfare friendly. It's so small that it would likely get stuck in a shell hole, never mind a trench. So we maintain a healthy degree of skepticism toward this idea when all is said and done. Now, having heard that, we're sure you're all thinking, all right, okay, so we might know literally nothing about its development, but maybe there is some insight to be garnered from where it was found. And certainly, this is a big and clever question to be asking, you big brain, but there is a slight problem with it. It can't even be agreed upon where it was found. For example, Sebastian Roblin, writing for the National Interest, claimed this, quoting him, "The unique Kugelpanzer, or ball tank, was built in Germany and at some point shipped over to Japanese-occupied China. The sole prototype was then captured by the Russian army in 1945 during its invasion of Manchuria. We have no idea what sources he was referencing to speak so confidently on the matter, but such is his explanation." And then in stark contrast to that, Kubinka says this, quoting again, "Many myths and legends have developed around the Kugelpanzer. According to one of them, the exotic car was taken from the WWII to Japan, and in August 1945, it was captured by Soviet troops in Manchuria. In fact, it was captured in Germany at the Kummersdorf training ground, the same place as the Maus super heavy tank," end quote. Now, normally, in the wonderful world of historiography, this would be the point where you would dismiss both claims and simply head to the primary sources to get the truth of the matter for yourself. Except today we can't do that, because you remember the start of this chapter when we said that there was no documentation relating to the tank's development? Well, it turns out that absolutely none have surfaced regarding its discovery either. Make no mistake, our guts are telling us that somewhere buried deep within the Kremlin archives there does indeed lie a document or 5 that would make the truth of the matter clear, but they certainly haven't surfaced yet. In fact, since we have no verifiable information at all to work with for this chapter, let's just throw out some of the commonly touted theories about its use, see if any of them strike a chord with you, and maybe get you thinking about some new ideas of your own. The most widely accepted theory is that the Kugelpanzer was intended as a one-man reconnaissance or observation tank. Its compact size, thin armor, and provision for a single operator suggest a role that prioritized stealth and survivability over firepower. It has even been described in some sources as a light manned reconnaissance vehicle, which fits the profile of a scout tasked with approaching enemy positions, observing terrain or troop movements, and reporting back via radio. This is indeed the line that the curatorial team at Kubinka takes, explaining to visitors that the Kugelpanzer was likely intended to serve as a mobile artillery observation post. Rather than engaging directly, as they see it, the vehicle would allow a spotter to operate relatively close to the front line under some degree of armor protection, guiding artillery fire while avoiding enemy patrols or stray shrapnel. However, skeptics of the reconnaissance theory are quick to point out that the Kugelpanzer's top speed, a mere 10 kilometers an hour, if you recall, would make it almost useless in a scouting role where rapid withdrawal could mean the difference between life and death. Moreover, its highly conspicuous spherical shape would hardly allow it to operate unnoticed. You're gonna see this thing. I mean, how many perfectly round shapes do you see in nature? It's basically none. As a result, it would likely stick out like a sore thumb to any keen-eyed sentry. Another recurring suggestion is that it might have been designed to lay communication cables across the battlefield. You can certainly see the logic in this, as during World War II, laying and subsequently maintaining telephone and telegraph lines was critical for ensuring secure and reliable coordination between units. Perhaps the Kugelpanzer's internal space may have housed a spool of cable which could be unrolled as the vehicle moved forward. It's not as though the Germans didn't do exactly this with other light vehicles. The SD KD-Z2 Kettenkrad, for example, was utilized heavily in this role, and with it having originally been designed as a light tractor for airborne troops before being pushed into a myriad of other roles when its full off-road capabilities were realized, maybe they wanted something dedicated for that specific role. Closely related to that idea is the suggestion that the Kugelpanzer might have been designed less as a tank and more as a mobile bunker. In this scenario, its role would not involve advancing, but rather surviving. The operator could crawl inside and use the vehicle as a makeshift armored refuge in dangerous areas, possibly on observation posts or along defensive lines. Again, there is some precedent for this as well, because the Germans did strap machine guns to all manner of light vehicles, BMW R-75s, Type 82 Kugelwagens, and others using them as emergency hole pluggers in collapsing lines. So, I mean, maybe. Where this idea falls apart for us, however, is in the Kugelpanzer's inadequate armor. At just 5mm thick, it just wasn't enough for this role. As you'll remember, even close-range rifle fire could penetrate it. Rather than wasting money building an elaborate machine that was so vulnerable, why wouldn't they just continue using the light cars and motorbikes already filling that role? Both alternatives were far cheaper to produce and were already available in plentiful numbers. Then there's the idea that the Kugelpanzer was intended for mine clearance. The concept here is that its weight could be used to trigger landmines safely, allowing it to lead infantry or supply convoys through minefields. The spherical shape might deflect blast forces more efficiently than flat armor while protecting the operator inside. However, several obvious flaws undermine this hypothesis. First, the Kugelpanzer's armor is far too light to withstand anything more than small explosives, and certainly not anti-tank mines. Second, the vehicle lacks any of the typical mine-clearing attachments like flails, rollers, or plows, which would be necessary for such a task. For this reason, the mine-clearing theory is generally dismissed as an unlikely afterthought, and we're inclined to agree. A more dramatic interpretation draws from the late war desperation of Germany's Japanese allies. As Japan shifted toward increasingly suicidal tactics, manned torpedoes, explosive motorboats, and piloted rockets, it has been suggested that the Japanese may have considered using the Kugelpanzer as a kamikaze-style weapon. According to this theory, the vehicle would be packed with explosives and then rolled toward enemy tanks or bunkers and detonated either by remote control or a one-way human pilot. While this approach would explain the lack of weaponry and crude construction, there's not really any hard evidence to support it. The Kugelpanzer, despite the uncertainty surrounding much of its story, is generally accepted as being German-built, even if it may have been discovered in Manchuria. German doctrine never embraced suicide tactics, which makes this theory particularly questionable. Moreover, no explosive fittings or modifications appear on the surviving example. While intriguing, the kamikaze theory remains speculative at best and is widely regarded as an imaginative stretch rather than a serious design purpose. Perhaps the most provocative theory, though, is that the Kugelpanzer was never a wartime combat vehicle at all, but rather a post-war fabrication or a mock-up. Critics of the Kugelpanzer's authenticity point to the absence of essential elements such as an exhaust outlet, ventilation system, or even a convincing drivetrain. Some observers even claim, although we cannot confirm this ourselves, that the main wheels of the vehicle on display appear to be welded in place, which would make movement impossible. It's what happens when you weld your wheels to your car. All of this has led to speculation that the Kugelpanzer might have been constructed after the war. This could have been done as a hoax, a museum curiosity, or a Soviet attempt at reverse engineering a rumored enemy design without having seen the original. Supporters of this hoax panzer theory suggest that Soviet engineers, having discovered vague references to a spherical German vehicle or encountered a basic sketch, may have attempted to fabricate one from scratch. Alternately, it could have been a vehicle originally intended for completely unrelated civilian or industrial purposes, later rebranded as a military oddity. Either way, until the Kubinka Museum permits a full forensic analysis of the vehicle's metallurgy, construction methods, and internal components, these doubts will continue to persist. For what it's worth, however, Kubinka themselves very strongly deny this, saying the following on the matter, we'll quote them. Abroad, there was even a theory that the Kugelpanzer was a fake made in the USSR after the war for unknown purposes. Allegedly, German equipment is distinguished by high-quality workmanship, and this machine has 2 rough welds. There is also no photo of the war trophy, and there are no captured German documents either, etc. This theory is refuted by a sharp drop in the quality of German armored vehicles as early as 1944. End quote. Now, that certainly makes sense as far as rebuttals go, but it would be very easy for them to kill those rumors dead, wouldn't it? With a bit of carbon dating. So why don't they? Are they hiding something? Or could it just be that as the custodians of 268 separate military vehicles, the largest collection in the entire world, they have significantly more pressing things to handle than helping to solve one of World War II's most bizarre, but also most niche mysteries? So it's probably that, isn't it? In the end, the Kugelpanzer remains one of World War II's strangest relics, a machine that looks like it belongs in a comic book rather than on a battlefield. No documents exist, no confirmed builder has been identified, no known purpose has been established. Just a peculiar little orb on wheels tucked away in a Russian museum, defying all explanation. Perhaps it was a reconnaissance tag, perhaps it was a glorified cable layer, or perhaps it was never intended to see combat at all. Even now, its story remains riddled with question marks, from its forgotten decades languishing in storage to the unanswered questions of how it even arrived at Kubinka in the first place. Until someone finally cracks it open, or some long-lost document surfaces from the depths of the Kremlin archives, the Kugelpanzer's true story will remain exactly what it is now. A mystery wrapped in steel. Thank you for watching.